Hello, everyone. This is Dominic from Tonebase, and we're so excited today to have Rebecca here virtually. She's, of course, a Tonebase artist. She's taught some wonderful courses and lessons on the Tonebase website. So hopefully you know her from that. But we're excited to have Rebecca here today to talk about a topic which is pretty general, but we're going to get into a little bit more detail: flexibility. So, flexibility is something that, of course, everyone agrees is important. It's something that we all try our best to achieve. And Rebecca's here to share her insights, her knowledge, her advice through her very illustrious career and life about this topic of flexibility. So, I'm going to welcome you onto the screen now, Rebecca. So, hello. Where are you coming to
Hello.
us from?
I'm coming from my piano house, I call it. This is St. Pete Beach, Florida, where we survived Hurricane Ian.
Wow, that must have been a very
So
trying time.
very.
Very,
But
very.
we lucked out. We're
But
good.
but you're okay. Your pianos are good because I understand you have two of them.
Pianos are great.
That's wonderful. Well, I mean, your energy's infectious, and in the past 30 minutes we've been talking, and I've just been getting in such a great mood to kind of start my afternoon. So I can't wait to get into this topic of flexibility. And one thing I liked very much is that you kind of left this more open ended about what this means to you. Whether it's through musical, artistic, technical, physical means. So, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the importance that flexibility has been for you? Because so for anyone that doesn't know, Rebecca was a child prodigy. She's worked with illustrious musicians like Arthur Rubinstein, Shebak, all different artists. So had so many experiences, and was flexibility something that came natural to you as a prodigy, or is that something that you had to work on yourself? And in what areas did you have to really focus on?
Very good. You ask good questions. Well, let me say that first of all, in flexibility, I was born double jointed. So flexibility as a dancer was really easy for me, and I still can do the splits of all kinds without any problem. I think that just as a person, my temperament is somebody that likes to be a dreamer. I always liked to make up stuff when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I would dance around the house even if I broke lamps. That's how I got lessons, and I would play by ear, and that's how come my parents dragged me to my brother's lessons. And then when we got home, I played all of his pieces, and he became very discouraged. So that was the end of piano for him, but the beginning of piano for me. So my life really, I think my MO is about. I love music. I love to share music, and I love helping other people. I love that aha feeling when I teach, and I also love it when I perform and give master classes. And now that I don't teach a whole bunch of students, my I come over here every day to the piano house, and it's like a magical time for me because I have more time to practice for myself. And so I've been able to think in greater depth about this idea of flexibility, which includes, of course, imagination. How do you turn on your own imagination? How to make change? How to educate yourself in an artistic way? How do you decide how to pedal? And what it really boils down to, and what I say to my few students and anybody that comes to RPPF, which is my summer festival, which I have every year at USF, it's all about being able to do things more than one way. So I think that when you learn, obviously, when you first learn the piano and you learn what a C scale is, you have to know what that is. I mean, there's certain facts and stuff. But the people that I teach, after the basics are in, there's no reason why you can't have this playful concept rather than I'm going to sit down and go to work at the piano. That is not my mantra. So I think the modern piano has tons of beauty. I mean, music is just food for the soul, and it's a food for healing and immense beauty. And I thought maybe just in talking about flexibility today, depending upon the questions, we could talk about just stuff that I'm practicing now. Because, in a sense, when you go from practicing to the concert stage, I don't practice on stage. I mean, that's too big of an experiment. But during the practicing preparedness phase, you play things a number of different ways, and that's what, when you get on stage, you have then the ability to be spontaneous, because you don't know which of the 5 or 6 interpretations and variations of that will come up for you. Depends on the piano, it depends on the hall. But in a microcosm, when I sit down at the piano, I don't know how I'm going to sound, because just like when you get out of bed in the morning, you don't feel the same every day. Some days you feel woo-boo, and some days, I get up, I think, God, why am I so tired? So, that really influences what happens, and you go from there. Every starting point is different. So, I mean, one of the things about flexibility is that if you're stiff when you play the piano, then it's very, very hard to make change. So if I play, like we're working on these, so if I play it with a stiff hand, it's a little bit slow and it's calculated. But it's not like I don't have an arch, I do, but if I have it, so here instead of moving up and down, which is how everybody I think learns, I'm moving left and right. And if I move, I call that sliding, by the way. So I'm not sure who taught sliding, but I teach sliding, because if you play with sliding, then you can play whatever tempo if you want. But if you're close to the key, that allows the hand to be looser, and you know where you are. I mean, if I'm coming down like this, I don't know exactly where I'm going to land. But if I'm floating above the keys, it's just kind of like walking. So then just in terms of how you play from day to day, I don't know, but I think he has staccato, but I think that's the thing I love about Brahms is the beauty of the resonance. So this to me is, I don't think he would buy that, because he was a man who loved the sensuousness and sound. And from the one little recording we have of his, it sounds like he played with a lot of pedal. If you take this second one, so the conventional way of pedaling is, but I pedal. So I think that the beauty of the sound, Brahms was definitely into sound. The other thing about his writing, which is different than other composers, so the Romantics were really into this, but especially Brahms. So if I play it this way, it doesn't activate the overtone series. If I do, so you can really hear the ringing of the piano as opposed that leads me to a different kind of more waltz that I would dance to. So one of the things that I think people, when when you look at piano music, anything for piano, you know, it's a combination of being a conductor, a singer, and a dancer. So if you were waltzing, you know, like so that there's only a certain speed that you can move your body around in that, you know. So I think it's nice to honor what it is, you know, the form that you're doing. So, you know, when you so the getting to the issue of flexibility. So you try it one way, you try it another way. I very often tell my students they have to come to their lesson with 3 different ways of playing a phrase or a piece or whatever it is. And sometimes they find it hard, but I want that their imagination, which is kind of like a muscle, you have to use it or you lose it. You know, it's just like, so if I'm playing like this, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to say today, in the olden days, before playing a piece, pianists would play something, you know. So what that does is that opens the lungs of the instrument. It's sort of like the cat is already purring when you start. And if I start just this way, so I started with nothing, just even if I put the pedal down, that's not enough because not enough of the strings are humming along. So the idea of how to use the pedal, or that the pedal exists as the color, whether it's the soft pedal or the right pedal, it's a terribly, terribly important thing, because if I play so I'm left with how am I left with that? I'm left with that because I'm changing the pedal here, but I'm not losing the bass. So, for instance, so I'm not losing the bass. So if you hear these Brahms waltzes, for instance, in 4-hand piano, you'll hear how much richer they are. And the reason they're richer is because the secondo so you have to, somewhere along the line, you have to know these pedaling techniques. You either have to make it up. I mean, so how do you learn these pedals? You know, like how do you figure this out? Well, one of the ways you figure it out is you look at music like. So that has that long pedal in the beginning, like this does. It's not written. So I think that you know, one of the points is to not kill the resonance of the instrument, to take that as a given and be flexible from there. So the other thing is, for instance, if you're using so this is written, and if you use Chopin's fingering, which is like it's 3 against a bigger 3 here, that's another technical concept which he actually talked a lot about, which is turning, which you can call rotation. But what the point I was going to make is, so I'm using a hand pedal. So I use a combination of foot pedal and hand pedal, and I mix and match all of these ideas. The more that you allow yourself permission to have an idea or to imagine something, so if I play it this way, I don't think he could have meant that, because this, so having that bass resonance and still being able to hear the right hand, it's sort of like when I was teaching this the other day, my guess would be if Chopin wrote this again, he wouldn't write these two bars he wouldn't write it just naked like this. Because what does this mean? So when you see, like, it's not, it has implied, and so the resonance starts before. So in the old performing traditions, they put that in from in between piece to piece. Let's say if you finish this. The first etude. They might go. So that it leads into it, and the flower the bloom of the flower is already going, and that is actually the big difference between playing music that was written before modern piano, where you don't have that bloom of the sound. I mean, the music itself doesn't have that extended overtone series in the composition of the music itself. So if you played like so it's a much more narrow focused band. But so just in my world, you can make the piano into a harpsichord or into a forte piano, but you can't make a forte piano into a modern piano. It doesn't go that way. So anyway, that's the sort of, I come over here, or when I go to teach, or when a student plays to me, or when I give a master class, the whole idea is to fire up that person's imagination, and to, even if they play in a very convincing way, I try my best to show them another way to do something physically, another way to do something interpretively, another kind of sound wave, or just a sound cloud of emotion, so that their tools and their horizons expand, so that when they go to the instrument, every day is like a day of, oh wow. And I say this to my students, if you don't have a oh wow, then go do something else that day. It's not written in any book you have to practice every single day. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Of course. I mean, well, thank you so much for this really wonderful, introduction, I would say, to the idea of flexibility. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about um, flexibility in a physical sense. Are there certain physical actions that you take to stay flexible or to keep yourself loose? Because you said that you can still do the splits and stuff. So for pianists that feel tight,
Well,
do you have any advice for that?
I'm built loose, so I'm really really lucky. But one of the things. So if you may have noticed already, I don't play. I don't play with really high fingers because you don't really need high fingers. So I think that if you have weight transfer, I mean, here's a good. So so you don't. I mean, so I guess one question would be like if somebody said to me they were stiff, I would say, can they move their fingers? Can you do this? Because most people can do this. So I think that if you can do that, and whether you can reach, however much you can reach, right? So then the question is, where can you be stiff? Where are you stiff? Can you walk? Can you rub? So sometimes people are stiff right in here, and they're stiff in here. I don't know why, but I mean, you can do something like this. But most people can do this kind of stuff really naturally. Like if you show somebody how to play repeated notes. Repeated notes are easy. You just keep your finger on the note. So the stiffness comes, from my experience in teaching, usually from using too much pressure and too much force. So as soon as you use like you paralyze your hand because you have like a claw instead of, I mean, I read it somewhere a long time ago, I have no idea where, that Liszt used to tell his students that the hand started here. Because all of this has to be fluent. So when you think of, all of these, etudes, so, this is more or less collapsed. That doesn't mean you don't have a lot of strength through it. You do, because you have the weight of your arm. So I'm not a person, so, like if you practice technique, you need to practice it with expression and with different touches so that you have, so the piano is a naturally staccato instrument. So it doesn't need this, it doesn't need that kind of high fingers. It doesn't need it for legato, because legato really is weight transfer, right? So I don't think that pianists who are stiff went to the piano stiff. I mean, I think that you acquire stiffness from not using your body in a flexible way. So, but I will say that, obviously, if you don't do any exercise, for instance, I'm a swimmer. I swim a quarter or half a mile usually every day, and in the Gulf if it's warm enough. And the swimming, opens my body up. I also do yoga because that's stretching, and we grow a lot of our own food here. So, I mean, I think if you don't move, you get constricted. But so at the piano, for instance, if you don't move, like if I play, so now I didn't move and I didn't breathe. So flexibility and lack of stiffness starts with breathing. If I breathe, comes out completely different because this melody is attached to my breath. So if you just think about how to phrase, you're already putting yourself in a box of stiffness. So you won't die because you are breathing enough to stay alive. But if you actually activate your breathing to be with the music, you'll really get a much, much better, more moving and more interesting result for you. I'm not talking about like what will your teacher think or what will the audience think. It's just to getting your own fulfillment and beauty and health, I guess we could say that, from the sound of music, the joy that you get.
Well, thank you for all these comments and advice, Rebecca, because, one interesting part of Tonebase is that we have these community concerts about once a month. And so a lot of our members, play, and we've got one coming up on January 7th. And we've had this challenge over the past month about preparing for a concert. And we play for everybody on Zoom live. And this is really great advice that you're giving us all, because when you're performing, you're focusing on the things that you're talking about, breathing, staying relaxed, that is what is going to achieve the best result. And actually the past 2 weeks, part of the challenge for preparing for this concert that I've posed is for our participants to play for someone, anyone, and to have the only focus being on their comfort and breathing and more, because a lot of times in our first run through, we're so focused with not having a memory slip, not playing wrong notes, not doing all these things that keeps us tense. But the idea of focusing and working on comfort and relaxing is something that I hear you talking about, and I think is so critical to achieving that.
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing about not having a memory lapse, if you are singing the piece, or if you have, if you decide to phrase a certain way, like, they're real decisions. It's sort of like a cueing system, a musical cueing system. And I know that I decide, in order to remember it, that I'm going to do this time the first way and that time the second way. And believe me, there isn't a performer alive that doesn't practice and make those decisions. Because, like, how do you remember anything? It's associations bigger than just the pitch. Or one of the things is sort of physical mapping. I mean, physical mapping, that's another reason to stay close to the keys, because so you have to have a kind of a feeling of relationships. And you make those as you're learning the piece, and that's part of the choreography and the interpretation. And so it's not like, I mean, nobody knows if they're going to have a memory lapse or not. And everybody has memory lapses. And nobody's perfect here. So you have to tell yourself that 1,000 million times, and nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So the bottom line on it is if you don't want to have any adventure, then just stay at home and watch CNN or whatever you do. It's just, don't get on an airplane, don't cross the street. But you have to allow for that margin. But if you have enough stuff in, like if you put enough vegetables in your stew with enough salt and pepper and seasonings, it can't be bad. And maybe with a little chicken broth, right?
So, well, I want to eat what you're cooking. I mean, it sounds like going to a concert of it sounds like going to a concert of yours is definitely going to be an experience and something that you create versus something that you're just trying to recreate, which we see happen all the time with ordinary performances, right? So I love this sense of discovery and this sense of adventure, really, that you have, because I'm sure that you're the first person to say that every time you play a piece, this idea of flexibility, you're finding new things every time, and or every other time perhaps, but thank you so much for a lot of these inspirational these moments, and this is very fitting leading up to our concert on January 7th on at Tonebase. So I do want to get to one question that Michael has. Michael's asking, do you breathe as if you were singing the music, or do you think about your breathing in that way, or are you just kind of but sometimes it's like anything, learning something, you try to figure out how to navigate breathing, and I've heard some teachers talk about breathing with the phrase. Do you even think about what you're doing with your breathing anymore, or is it just kind of instinctual, would you say?
When I teach, I insist that students sing out loud. I don't care whether they could sing well or not. Nobody's becoming an opera singer here. But you have to be able to I mean, some melodies are of course not singable, so then you have to decide where to breathe. But I believe in training the breath to go with the music. So if you do well, like this, everybody knows so you have to decide how you breathe is going to determine how you phrase. Thinking about singing is not good enough at all, because you have to feel, and also it doesn't control anxiety. The breath has to go through your whole body. It's not like an intellectual thing. So how long you want the phrase. Maybe I want it. So I played it a little bit faster in order to do all that on one breath. But that's another way of allowing flexibility in, because if I do the repeat, as the saying goes, there's no life without breath. There's no music without breath. I mean, real breath. So I'm aware of my breathing, and I'm aware that my breathing is influencing my rubato, that's the word, or my agagic, that's the other good word. When I'm playing, I've been doing this for whatever, 1,000 years, it feels like. So I don't play without breathing. I mean, it's not possible for me. But as a child, yeah, I had to learn how to breathe. I had to learn how to sing, and I think it's really, I would say to everybody, if you can't carry a tune, join some chorus. Be able to do that, and be able to do that in more than one key, and sing in more than one key, because it's music is an oral art. It's we can't if you can't if you don't understand or can't hear different pitches and sing them, you can't play very well. And the same thing, it's about time. You have to be able to feel rhythm. You can't stop time. That time is marching on. So you have to be able to feel that in order to play well. It's like no way, Jose, if you can't do those things.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds beautiful, and thank you again for all these demonstrations of music, because it's so it's so compelling, especially with how you treat the bass and the pedaling. I mean, it's remarkable. The other a few other questions that I have regarding flexibility are maybe performance related. Do you ever find yourself playing, in a concert or something, and realizing, midway through a piece that maybe your plan for the piece has to change, or because sometimes one thing that we talk about on Tonebase is that the practice room, we practice, we play, and we have an idea about what we want to do, but sometimes you get in front of the public and things change. It's different now. And how do you navigate that flexibility? Because again, I'm sure some of our members and some of our performers on Saturday will have that experience of things feeling different, even on the same piano. But when they have Zoom on and we have people watching, do you have any advice for that feeling of having to change midway, mid plan? Are there things that you try to focus on?
Yeah. First of all, don't expect to feel the same from day to day. Even if you are playing your own piano in your own space, don't expect, if you're going to a hall that you've played in, I don't know, 50 times, the pianos change. I mean, my piano changes from day to day. I don't do anything to it. I change from day to day. So it's a living, breathing experience. So the other thing is that, yeah, I don't think there's ever a CD, a DVD, a concert. I don't think I've ever done anything where I haven't said, gee, why did I do that? I'm not going to do that again. I mean, because that's already in the past, and I'm going on to another idea or another inspiration or another day, a new dream. So the one thing that I have is, regardless of where I am, let's say, what I'm playing, when you have that epiphany that you're not going to play it this way again, or this needs changing, wait until the performance is over that way that you intended. Do not try to change anything in the middle, because unless you're extremely experienced, like, don't change your fingering, don't change the pedaling, don't, keep to your general plan, because you don't want to fall apart. So it's a question of, it's a little bit related to what happens when, excuse my French, shit happens. I mean, stuff happens. You have a finger twist, a wrong exit here, there. So a lot of this idea is in the area of recovery. So you have to practice recovery. So how do you practice recovery? So it is important, whoever is going to be playing on this concert, that my advice would be, get up in the morning, do not have coffee, go over to the piano, turn on your Zoom or your camera, whatever, get your dog there as your audience, or cat, or whoever you have, and perform the piece for yourself. So that will show up stuff. First, you're not really awake. Your reflexes are a little bit slow. Your mind is a little bit sluggish, unless you happen to be one of these pop-up and I'm ready, which is not usual. So it's very revealing, and that you get a lot of feedback. For that reason, I always practice in the morning. I mean, whether I'm learning new repertoire or polishing or whatever, at the end of the day, after everybody's fingerprints and all the emotions of the news and everything else has been touching me, I'm not fresh anymore. So you really need a fresh space. And that's, if you're going to perform, you have to play your thing all the way through, record it, and then don't listen to it right away. Let a few hours go by so that you will have forgotten. You'll be surprised that it's not going to sound the way you thought it did, probably, unless you're really experienced. And then you go back and say, okay, well, what can I fix? And so I think the idea of learning a piece, playing it all the way through, and then the third part is practice performing it is a critical thing. Not wait. Going for your piano lesson is not good enough. You have to learn how to perform for yourself.
Well, thank you very much for that advice, especially for everyone that's preparing for this Saturday. So Lumi has a question about breathing, actually, another question. Lumi is asking, how do you breathe in the long, fast passage playing? Lumi says, I tend to tense up and hold my breath. Fast notes, difficult things. Do you simply have to force yourself to do the opposite of what we're kind of built to do, which is tense up when it gets hard? How do you, with maybe slower passage work, it might be more natural for people, but again, even taking the F minor, etude that you were demonstrating earlier, I'm sure it's very easy for people to hold their breath the whole etude because they're so nervous not to, is that something that obviously you breathe because you're very natural, but
you have to regulate the breathing. You have to plan it. Like, for instance, so I just took a breath. So I made it part of the phrasing. So that you have to breathe. You have to kind of construct the breathing wherever you think the phrase is. So you have to make a definite breathing points. So if you did, so if I did, so I just took a breath. I'm sort of trying to exaggerate where you can breathe. So all of these, like this one too. So if I do that, so I'm phrasing in every 2 bars because that's how I'm breathing. So 2 or 4 bars, I don't know what piece she's talking about, and this is where it gets tricky, because if she were sitting here, I would show her exactly 2 or 3 different ways of breathing. Usually in a very complicated passage, even in a very complicated, there's some melodic line there that you can make, like, so I just made I extracted a little melody that I could sing from all of these notes in order to breathe. So I'm sure that whether she's playing, I don't know what, there's as I say, there's ways of finding breathing places, and then you have to teach yourself to breathe. So people who get stiff need to start with. We just finished Christmas carols. I'm sure she can sing Christmas carols and breathe. So it's a basic thing. You have to just get into it.
Right, and Michael, one of our chatters, is saying, yes, scripted breathing. This is a great idea, and I agree that that's something that we should practice more. Is kind of what you are talking about here, which is really thinking about where you breathe, how you breathe. And I think that could be very helpful for many of us.
Here's a great piece. comes in when you take a breath. So I usually teach breathing, start to the breath holders, getting people out of being in the breath holder club by giving them a beautiful nocturne, because even as this gets more and more ornamented, you can still sing the basic notes and decide. I try to follow Chopin's phrasing, and you can figure out how to breathe, and you practice breathing, and then you practice in another, like in a different style. If you anything you do, whether you're painting the interior of your apartment or you're eating, you're breathing.
Yeah.
So you have to bring that into piano, into the life of playing, and it will really open your ears and open your heart and help with your imagination. You have to feed it. You can't just not have a lot of blood and oxygen going through your system. You need that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, because again, I think that's really resonating with a lot of people, and myself is really focusing more on these aspects, and I see that as Michelle comments, it's kind of like when Michelle says she used to do public poetry reading, and when you're reading a poem, you also plan where you breathe.
Absolutely, you
So
have to breathe.
It's exactly the same way. And I see that there's a question from Harriet about how to remain flexible when doing slow practicing. So I guess especially when learning something difficult. So for example, maybe we're learning, you were talking about Mephisto Waltz earlier, or difficult Chopin Etude. Maybe we're learning something like that.
I mean, what is she talking about? Like,
well,
I mean, how to practice slow and stay flexible, right?
Yeah, because I guess in her case, maybe practicing slow with something difficult, you tighten up and maybe you don't feel as flexible. Is it the same principle as applying? You just breathe, and other things that you think about when you're.
So, if you're playing really slow, right? So I'm now breathing, every 2 bars, and you can see it. I'm using a really loose hand. So I mean, how slow are we talking about? Like if you're walking. So when you're walking, you have to stay in motion, and in a way, the slower you walk, the more balance you need. So the more you have to balance from your upper leg, right? But you're still breathing. So one of the things that is a huge thing in my life as a teacher is, yes, I myself heard a remarkable thing when Richter played in Bloomington and I was a student there. And he played, well, it doesn't matter what he played. Well, maybe it does. But in any case, it was an interesting concert because a light bulb burst in the middle of the concert, and it was on stage, and it didn't hit him, but it almost hit him. And I think that kind of threw that concert, that piece a little bit off. But at the end, he came back on stage, and everybody left the hall, and I don't know why I didn't leave. I wasn't out yet. But he came back on stage, he sat at the piano, and I thought, well, maybe I should hide somewhere because maybe he's going to play. And sure enough, he had played this. So obviously he wasn't happy with it. He came back and did this. He played the whole first movement, this tempo. did I hear? I don't, I mean, I never talked to him to ask him, but what I heard was, I heard him really listening to the middle and end of each sound and exaggerating the phrasing, you know. But so there is a huge, wonderful thing about practicing slowly, but at the same time, you have to practice in tempo. And in order to even learn how to stay loose, you have to practice faster than tempo, that your end tempo. Because you have to be able, just like when you walk, you have to be able to walk slow, medium, fast. You have to be able to go up and down stairs that are steep or not steep. So you can't just to think that I'm going to practice slow and then I'm going to speed it up and then I'm going to get to tempo and then everything is going to be hunky-dory is a huge fallacy. Because you have to be able to do it in all different ways. You can't just drive 20 miles an hour and expect to not have an accident at some point. I mean, it's just, right? You need more flexibility.
Right. Well, the other thing that I actually like very much is that depending on the tempo and depending on your breathing, the tempo changes. I really like that example in the Brahms A-flat waltz of how when you breathed slower, your tempo got a little bit faster because you couldn't hold your breath long enough, and then faster breaths gave it a different feeling altogether. So I really like how and what happens is it sounds natural. It's both tempos sound correct because you're using natural breath to guide you.
And the corollary to that is there's like, how many ways are there to slice an apple? As many as you can think of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's no right or wrong here. Even if you are one of these purists to say, well, in this style you have to do this. Oh, there's plenty of room for many ways to play anything. So don't feel that, don't go into the right or wrong or the perfection. The idea of being a perfectionist doesn't exist. I mean, there is no way to be perfect, period. So don't even think about it.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. We have a few last questions before maybe we wrap things up. But let's see here. I see Anonymous has a question. Let's see. It says, Anonymous says, what's your best concept for a free toolkit of color? So do you have, I think what Anonymous is asking is about color and finding colors. Are there certain tools? Is there a toolkit that you use to access different sounds and colors? Do you think about the left pedal? Do you think about speed of? How do you access your toolkit of color? I think is what Anonymous is basically asking. Are there things that go on in your mind?
First of all, it depends on the piano because as soon as you touch a piano, there are different kinds and levels of piano. Depends on that. So the piano will speak to you how to voice. I think a lot of people have, I'm not sure that people know how to voice. So voicing has to do with color. Length of sound has to do, hand pedal, foot pedal. So there's touch too. So it's not an intellectual thing at all. I think it's a combination of knowing these different techniques and certain ways of playing used to be more popular 50 years ago than they are now. So, the broader the spectrum, the better. And then you have to experiment and figure out what do you want to wear that day? Pick something from your closet, and that's what you're going to wear that day, and that's it, and go from there.
Thank you. We have another question from Michael. Do you have advice for overcoming a tendency to hold the shoulders in a shrug position or other postural contortions? Do you have any advice for students that have that issue of
breathe. Breathe. Sit at the piano. You can do this a few times. You can play like a short piece, a stop after 8 bars. Have them stop after 8 bars and drop their shoulders. But the other thing is sometimes if I play like, and if I'm here, so very often, shoulders come from sitting too close to the piano. So sit back and don't sit too high, because I'm a big one. You know, for me, it's much easier to operate the piano when you're not sitting high because you can use gravity. So people that hold their breath and have their shoulders high don't use gravity. Well, we all use gravity living on Earth. I mean, that's really, really important. So if you're using gravity and you feel gravity, and that means how you sit, you can think of like the 4-point position, 2 feet on the ground, your sits bones here, and if your feet are on the pedals, which they are most of the time, so you feel that in your heels, so legs relax. So that's, it's a total postural thing, and in that support, shoulders are down. I sound like I'm an Alexander teacher, but I'm not. So it's that, you have to have that total body awareness.
Certainly. Thank you. I mean, everyone, of course, I know you can't see the comments, but everyone is really stunned by just how physically effortless your technique is, how you're just able to, just so natural, your way at the piano. So and of course, everyone is stunned by your beauty and your musicality and the demonstrations. So I know you can't see all of that. You're alone in a Zoom meeting with me right
Thank
now.
you.
But still, that's just a comment I wanted to mention. The last question that I might pose to you is one regarding Chopin. Rudell brings up that Chopin has mentioned breathing with the pedal, and Rudell is asking, how does this happen? Is that coinciding with a scripted type of breath? I mean, Chopin's pedal markings sometimes do coincide with phrase lengths and bass note, pedal points and stuff. But do you have any comments on the idea of this comment of breathing with the pedal that Chopin mentions?
I think that what I think for me, I think that Chopin's sound world was, you know, well, first of all, I was lucky enough to play a lot of Pleyel pianos. So the Pleyel, which was Chopin's favorite instrument, was very, very similar to Steinway. A little bit more narrow sound, but has a really beautiful, sweet singing voice. And so when I think what happened, where Chopin was coming from what I understand is when, you can't hear this on Zoom yet because technology isn't there, but if you put the pedal down, you can hear that the dampers go, so I can make that happen because if I go like this, hello, can you hear the sound? Hello! That's louder. So if the piano were open, so when the dampers are up, it activates what Chopin called the lungs of the piano. So that's why, if you're doing this. So I am sure that these long pedals that you see in Macaulay, so I'm not changing the pedal here. I'm changing just the beauty of the sound resonating like that. And I'm, just looking at Chopin's manuscripts. So I'm on one pedal here. So it's a start to analyze his fingerings and his pedal marks that come through Mikuli, you can see that he used a lot of hand pedal and long foot pedals and was able to modulate the sound so that he could keep resonances going. This, by the way, is something that Brahms did. I mean, Brahms even wrote an article about how he was so disappointed that people put so much sauce on his music called right pedal. And this is something that really was, you know, it's old, kind of old world pedaling. And so, you know, a lot of that isn't in existence now, but it shouldn't go away because I'm sure that Chopin did that. All his markings indicate that. So, and same with Brahms. I mean, Brahms has very interesting fingerings, and they're about sound. So the whole Leczetitsky actually school that comes from, you know, when we transitioned from forte piano to modern piano, and people were putting their forte pianos wherever they put them and getting into modern piano. So the whole forte piano idea was using fingerings and pedaling for certain sounds and expressions. And that came into modern piano a lot through Leczetitsky. And you see that in the Schnabel edition, which is not really useful for romantic piano and has a little, well, for me, it's a little too idiosyncratic with just what Schnabel will do. But when you have these composers who are sending these personal notes of phrasing, if you look at the Mikuli edition of anything, it's so far from the Paderewski edition or the Jan Akir edition. And as I have said to many students, for my money, you can use whatever edition you want, but also look at Mikuli, because who knew Mikuli? Who knew Chopin was Mikuli. Paderewski didn't know Chopin, and I would like to know Chopin, but the best way in is Mikuli because he knew him. So, you know, that's where he's getting that idea, which I think is, you know, impossible to teach on Zoom. But that's the image of it.
I mean, certainly I would say that you've taught extraordinarily well on Zoom today. We've all really enjoyed your presence, your knowledge, your music. You know, everyone is just saying thank you for an amazing live stream. Thank you. Could listen to her playing all day. I'm overwhelmed. I agree. Bravo. I mean,
thank you.
So many, you know, exemplary comments. I think we'll be wrapping things up now. You know, and of course, everyone, Rebecca's got a series of courses on Tonebase, and you should check those out because they're wonderful.
And also, maybe I could just say the Rebecca Penneys Piano Festival has a YouTube. Actually, it has a lot of my own YouTube stuff and festival guests and stuff like that. And the website is RebeccaPenneyspianoFestival.org, and there's RebeccaPenneys.com.
Very good.
It's like whatever. They're not everything is up to date, but you know. It is what it is.
I'm sharing the festival website right now in the chat, so you guys can all check that out.
Yeah, and then go to RebeccaPenneys.com.
Got that.
And they can get to the YouTube
yes.
from there. Either
got
one.
that as well. So I posted both of those in the chat just for everybody. So check those out. And I'm sure we'll see more of Rebecca on Tonebase. But everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. You know, see you guys hopefully on.
And you too.
Thank you. Yes, Rebecca, you too, and hopefully see everyone, you know, on January 7th for the community concert. But thanks again, Rebecca, so much for everything that you've offered today. So
everybody remember to breathe, especially when you're waiting to play.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Don't need the tension building up beforehand. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, and
Ciao
cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.